The reaction to Pokémon Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl is definitely mixed. For the fans that loved the reveal of these games, it's clear as day why. Pure nostalgia and, more importantly, loyalty to the franchise, more specifically Generation 4. It feels like these are the type of Pokemon fans you'd find defending Generation 4 like their lives depended on it in the replies of Twitter polls asking what the best generation is. In fact, it probably doesn't even matter how the remakes of Pokémon Diamond and Pearl turned out, they'd almost certainly be in love regardless. Personally, I don't understand this die-hard loyalty that some Pokemon fans have for certain generations. The way I see it, each generation has its pros and cons, and that's basically it. Getting back on topic, we all know of at least several people that didn't love the reveal of these games, but unlike the fans that loved it, I think it's more complicated figuring out exactly why people aren't so thrilled about these games. You might be thinking, it's because it looks like a mobile game, and although I agree that's a big part of it, I think it goes a bit deeper than that. First, let's discuss the expectations leading up to the reveal of the remakes. Pokemon remakes are generally pretty good, with Heart Gold and Silver being absolutely amazing. Unlike remakes in other gaming franchises, it feels like Pokemon remakes bring a lot more to the table that almost seems like it's a necessity. For example, sure, Red and Blue could have just stayed on the Game Boy, but the Pokemon formula is so similar from one game to the next that it makes sense to put out an updated version of the game when new hardware and new Pokemon releases. For Pokemon, each new entry in the series just feels like a more expansive and innovative version of the last entry. Well, it did all the way up until Generation 6 anyways. Compare that to a franchise like Zelda, where each new entry in the series is more or less drastically different than the previous. You can't simply remake A Link to the Past in Wind Waker's engine, nor could you remake Majora's Mask in Skyward Sword's engine. And even if it could possibly be done, why would you? People look back on those games and say, wow, Majora's Mask is a masterpiece. The only update I'd want for it is cleaner visuals and some quality of life improvements. But people look back at older Pokemon games and say, wouldn't it be awesome if a remake of this game had following Pokemon, 3D battles and environments, and my trusty anthropomorphic starter Pokemon? So, for the longest time, that's what Pokemon remakes have been all about, and it's a fairly straightforward formula that's kind of difficult to screw up. But obviously that's not the formula they're using with Pokémon Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl. And this is where the point of my video comes into play. There's fans that are upset because they wanted a remake of Diamond and Pearl in the Sword and Shield engine. There's fans upset because they wanted the game to look more along the lines of ORAS or Let's Go. And then there's the fans like me who understand what Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl are trying to accomplish, but are disappointed with the actual execution. I'll start by addressing the first two groups of disappointed fans. I think most of the people that wanted the Gen 4 remakes in the style of Sword and Shield either A, liked Sword and Shield, or B, never stopped to think about how impossible it'd be to make Diamond and Pearl work in a fully 3D environment with a mostly dynamic camera. Like, I assume the point of using the Gen 8 engine would be to not have mostly over-the-top camera angles like in ORAS, otherwise you could just use the Let's Go engine for that. These fans must have imagined sprawling landscapes where you could, for example, see the whole blizzardy snowfields of Route 217. While that does seem pretty cool, it just wouldn't work for the more tight-knit locations with complicated route structure. Part of the reason Sword and Shield's routes suck so much is probably because of the more dynamic 3D camera angles if you think about it. Like, how would Mount Coronet work in Sword and Shield's engine? The camera would be stuck to walls all over the place. The only way I could see it working is if there were some major overhauls to route structure, but I assume Game Freak foresaw how bad of an idea that would have been, because the route structure of Diamond and Pearl is one of the best aspects about the game. For the fans that wanted the game to look more along the lines of ORAS or Let's Go, I can definitely see where they're coming from, but I think it wouldn't be all too exciting in the year 2021. Despite all of Sword and Shield's flaws, it's still the most fully fledged 3D experience we've had thus far, especially in areas where you have full control of the camera. While ORAS fit right in with Generation 6, I feel like reverting back to that style would be underwhelming. Pokemon remakes have always visually felt right at home in their respective generations, and Diamond and Pearl in the style of ORAS or Let's Go would feel out of place alongside Sword and Shield. So instead, Game Freak decided to break the norm and have a different studio develop an extremely faithful version of the remakes. It's definitely a very safe approach to making remakes, but I think it's actually the right approach going forward. For one, doing so drastically shortens the development time, since the games have a much smaller scope, and allows Game Freak to focus their attention on new games and ideas. But what I believe to be more important is the fact that Pokémon games, starting with Generation 6, are becoming more and more different from each other, and it's going to be very difficult to try and remake them since too many updates would result in a loss of identity. For instance, I'm of the opinion that Emerald is still the definitive Hoenn experience, and Let's Go feels like a completely different game than Pokémon Yellow, whereas I think Fire Red Leaf Green and Heart Gold Soul Silver replaced their originals as the best versions of their respective experiences. So I was pumped at the idea of Diamond and Pearl remakes being more of a faithful Sinnoh experience. But now that Masuda and Ueda have decided to create a faithful remake, they opened the game up to the common criticisms that plague most other game franchise remakes. For example, the charm of the originals could be lost in translation like in Conquer Live and Reloaded and Turtles in Time Reshelled. Or as in the case of Majora's Mask 3D, the game could be torn apart by a small amount of changes that spoil the otherwise great additions. And that's my main problem with Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl so far. The charm of the originals is completely lost. People might argue that the style is retained through the chibi-like characters and faithful overworld recreation, but let me ask you a simple question. Do the new 3D graphics of Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl actually appeal to you more than the sprite graphics of the originals? Just because something is in 3D doesn't mean it's better, and this is a clear example proving that. I think a lot of people still underestimate how good pixel art in Pokemon games look. For me, these new graphics change the whole atmosphere of the game. I remember watching the intro to Diamond and Pearl for the first time ever, and it feeling so epic as the dark clouds surrounding Mount Coronet closed in and you're greeted to an ominous shadow of Dialga or Palkia. The whole experience felt so serious to me. Now look at the new games. Is it all just fun and games now? I never imagined the main character looking so goofy, and I can't even start to think about how Cyrus or Cynthia will look. Like, imagine Cyrus being sent to the Distortion world in chibi form. I actually don't understand why they went with the chibi design for characters at all. To me, Pokemon characters in the overworld for generations 1 through 5 were never chibi, they just looked really short because the camera angle was always glued to a top-down perspective and everything was grid-based. So I don't get why people are now saying they're going with the chibi designs from the original Diamond and Pearl. For me, what I would have preferred is a similar 2D art style to the original, but with more detail and obviously HD clarity. For example, draw in actual backgrounds during battles and implement moving Pokemon sprites and a more dynamic battle camera like in Generation 5. Use the advances in technology to make everything 60 FPS in order to allow the game to just feel more snappy like in Generation 3. For the overworld elements that were 3D, keep them the way they were, but just up the poly count and textures across the board. Maybe even remodel or redraw things that didn't look too good in the originals. I've heard others mention how an art style similar to Octopath Traveler might be a good fit, and I'd definitely be curious to see if something like that could work with Pokemon. Pokemon Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl are advertised as being very faithful to the originals, and I think there's no better way to make that come to fruition than to have gone about it in the way that I've suggested. Unfortunately, it is what it is, and I don't think much will change before the game's release later in the year, but there is definitely some minor changes that could be made to make the games look a lot better. Just look at how much better simple outlines make everything feel. But if I'm going to make a prediction right now, unfortunately it's that Pokemon Platinum will remain the go-to Sinnoh experience and will also maintain its stupid price tag.